Welcome to Reckless Movie Reviews, a vlog where I like to review movies that I've seen recently or that I just feel like reviewing. And it's a pretty loose sort of review series. I am unscripted, uncensored, and I'm speaking the truth. You can't silence me, you know? I'm so edgy. I'm brutally honest. Stupid shit like that. And I'd like to preface this review by saying I'm a pretty big comic book fan, and probably one of my favorite comics, and you know what, probably my favorite comic ever, is Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, written and drawn by Frank Miller. Back in the 80s, Frank Miller could do no wrong. He was pretty much a golden child of comic history at the time, you know? He was going around reinventing comic book characters like Daredevil and just making them dark and edgy. Modern audiences up to the 80s, they were still familiar with the Batman Adam West series with Burt Ward as Robin and Cesar Romero as the Joker. They were only familiar with that up to that point. You know, silly comedic sort of take on the character. So throughout the 70s to the late 80s, DC was trying to make the character darker, but to regular folks, they were only familiar with this sort of cheesy Batman. But then when Dark Knight Returns came out, audiences were just like taken by surprise by how dark this comic was. It tells the story of a 55-year-old Batman who comes out of retirement after 10 years of not being Batman, and he just pretty much goes all out on the criminals of Gotham City once again. Basically, just imagine Dirty Harry as Batman, and this is that comic. Ever since I read this comic, I was kind of thinking it would be kind of cool to see a film based on it, but I thought live action just wouldn't work. Like, the way Batman is in this comic, you couldn't get an actor to really fit that role as Batman. Like, he's an old man, but he's also huge and muscular, and you'd have to find a good actor. Like, that'd be impossible. So I was thinking that, well, it would be cool if they made an animated film. Well, guess what? Warner Brothers has released part 1 of a 2-part film series based on The Dark Knight Returns. Batman: The Dark Knight Returns Part 1. This pretty much adapts the first 2 issues of the Batman: Dark Knight Returns comic anthology. It's a 4-issue series, so I assume the second part is going to be based on the last 2 issues, so kind of goes without saying. And I don't know, I was kind of afraid of this because Warner Brothers has done Dark Knight Returns twice, kind of. They did it once, well, they did it like short adaptations. Like, they did it once in the Batman the Animated Series cartoon, like the last season where they had a different art style. And one of the episodes was Legends of the Dark Knight, where a girl named Carrie tells the sort of short, abridged story of the Dark Knight Returns. And that was really cool. And then the Batman cartoon that came out in like 2004, well, I don't remember the episode. It was like, it took place in the future, and it had an old Batman. He fought against like Mr. Freeze, so it wasn't really an adaptation. It was just an adaptation in the sense that Batman looks like the Dark Knight Returns version. The problem I had with like the idea of an animated version of this is I saw All-Star Superman, and that's probably one of my favorite Superman comics. That comic was really excellent. And they made a movie based on that like a year ago or 2 years ago, I'm not sure. And the movie was just disappointing. Like, all the best parts, the stuff I loved about that comic, were missing, and things were changed, and it was kind of dumbed down for regular audiences. It was just disgraceful. Disgraceful, you know? I was surprised, though, because I saw it, and it's extremely faithful. Like, pretty much everything is in here. They even put in most of the newscaster segments. Like, in the comic, throughout, they give you these newscaster segments that just pretty much give all the different points of view of the Gotham citizens and the newscasters, and, like, talk shows, and, like, what people think of Batman returning, and, like, all the different crimes that are happening, and just, I'm surprised they kept that in. Like, I like that stuff in the comic, and Like, you'd think they'd be like, well, this stuff is unnecessary, let's just cut it out. No, they kept it in. They did, and that was great. Something that gets lost in the adaptation process is the original comic is extremely wordy. Like, there's a lot of interior monologues by all the characters, every single character. The movie does not have any of that stuff. It doesn't have a single bit of interior monologues. And if you're familiar with Frank Miller stuff, his stuff is filled with that. That's part of why I like the comic, and that stuff is gone. And I understand why they got rid of it. It just feels weird not having them there. It's just, a lot of scenes are just silent when they're supposed to have, like, Bruce Wayne thinking about how shitty the city has become, you know? And it's just not there. That was kind of disappointing. My point is, you're kind of cheating yourself if you don't read the comic. If you haven't read this comic, the movie isn't going to have the same effect on you. If you haven't read the comic, I don't know what's wrong with you. If you're a Batman fan, I really don't know what's wrong with you. Like, if you haven't at least read it. Yeah, I don't expect you to necessarily like the comic, but you have to at least read it. So if you haven't read it, then the movie isn't going to be as good to you. Or, okay, well, probably it will, but a lot of the things just won't have the same impact on you. Now, another thing, of course, this is an animated movie, so you're probably wondering how good the animation is. If you're familiar with Young Justice, that gives you an idea of what the animation is like. It's not as good as, like, a theatrical animated film, and it just doesn't look as good as the comic. And I don't expect it to, but it doesn't really come close. Like, the character models, some of them don't really look like Frank Miller style. It's not an extremely faithful adaptation as far as the way Frank Miller characters are drawn. But where the movie shines in animation, though, is the fight choreography. That stuff is really, really good. Because, you're taking still images of Batman punching someone, and you're putting them in motion, and you're also adding all this other stuff in between. And they did a really great job. They know how to make an action scene. They're great at that. And there's all kinds of blood in this movie. Like, Batman throws batarangs into a dude's arm, and they actually are in his arm. They're embedded in his arm. Another thing I loved about this movie is that the soundtrack sounds so 80s, which is pretty awesome, because the comic came out in the 80s, and it kind of depicts the 80s as they happened. The voice actors are generally excellent. Like, they got Peter Weller to play Batman, and he does a good job sounding like an old man, all business sort of type thing, where he does intimidation in just such a subtle way. Gordon is played by David Selby, and he does an okay job. His first line in the movie, it just sounds kind of robotic. As the film goes along, he does a lot better, and by the end of the movie, he does a fantastic job. And Michael McKean plays Dr. Wolper. The character's whole motivation in the movie is trying to push his career forward by getting all these horrifying supervillain psychopaths out of Arkham to prove that I can cure anyone's psychosis, and Batman is just a horrible person that's forcing these people to be insane or whatever. He does a pretty great job. Great deliveries. Last but not least, I should mention is Michael Emerson as the Joker. Now, they don't really have the Joker speak so much in this first part, and it's just sort of a cameo. The Joker doesn't really come into play until the third book. They just wanted to keep him on the down low in this film and just wait until the next one to bring him out. To me, the Frank Miller Joker, it's not the Joker a lot of people are familiar with. Like, it's a completely different Joker. He's sort of this feminine type of Joker, this sort of quiet, creepy type of Joker he's less outspoken. Michael Emerson is good as the Joker. That's what I'm saying. One change about the movie that I noticed, though, is that Two-Face in the comic, Two-Face threatens to destroy these towers in Gotham. They're called the Gotham Twin Towers. He threatens to blow them up by using bombs that are inside helicopters. And that's what he's trying to do in the comic. Now, they kept that in for the most part, but you could probably understand they wanted to avoid the 9/11 aspects So, you know, they changed the name of the towers from the Gotham City Twin Towers to the Gotham Life Building. That's what they changed the name to, and I can understand why they did that. Like, it's just something I noticed. I'm not complaining, but ultimately, it's a good movie. It's great for fans of the comic. They did include a preview of the second part of The Dark Knight Returns. I got a good impression of it. Probably want to check out that one too. I might do a review of that. See you later, I guess. Just remember to read this comic if you haven't. I highly suggest it. It's really great. Got some great art in here and some pretty little pictures and some pretty little writing. So read it up. Read it down your throat. I highly suggest it. Again. So I'll see you later. Sid, signing out.